1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1. Peter is moving from the persecution this time and this last section. By the way, chapters and verses aren't in the original manuscript. Those were added later, so sometimes it's nice the way they divide them out so you can remember verses by number and chapter, those kind of things. But sometimes you'll see that a chapter is a continuing thought. It's carried over from the chapter before, and so that can be a little limiting for us to understand. But this is a nice break that they put here for chapter 5, because it moves from the persecution that Peter's been focusing on, and then he's closing the letter. He directs it to leaders in the church and then to the church in general, and closes with some basic things that we'll see over the next, probably 3 or 4 weeks. But 1 Peter chapter 5, this is directed to elders or pastors in particular, those who are involved with the believers in these local churches. These are scattered churches that Peter's writing to, different ones in the Roman Empire, and we'll see more of that in just a minute. But 1 Peter 5, verse 1, we'll read down through verse 4. He says, "The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder, and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away." Now, Peter is giving an analogy in these verses, and we're really just going to introduce it. I know it'll be 30-some minutes long probably, but we're just going to introduce the idea this evening, and then we'll see the application of it, Lord willing, next time. But he's using the idea of shepherding and a flock here, and shepherding is very common to the average person in Bible times. They're very familiar with shepherding. Now us, on the other hand, we have a pretty limited knowledge about shepherding here in our country, especially that as a trade. Now, even those who have dealt with sheep firsthand, anybody dealt with sheep firsthand? Okay, yeah. Even those who deal with sheep firsthand here in our country, it's really not the same as shepherding in Bible times. It's kind of a different animal, and so it is that way in other parts of the world. Some shepherd today the same way they did hundreds of years ago in Bible times there, but hopefully we can get a better understanding. They are wonderful animals. I know we kind of pick at them sometimes as being dumb animals, and to some extent they are. In some areas they're very, very intelligent, but it's really not about smart or dumb per se, but it's how God created them. He made them special, and it doesn't make them inferior. Actually, we'll see some of those things this evening. They're one of the most amazing animals that God put on the planet here. But just to kind of introduce the idea, and then we'll see next week, Lord willing, how that applies to pastors and people in leadership in the church. But sheep are the only animal in the world that can be totally lost and be 2 or 3 miles from their home. They don't have to be very far away at all there. Most of us have heard some of those stories about dogs or other pets, and just they travel miles and miles to get back to their home and do those kind of things. And that's not our dog, by the way. Our dog wandered just 2 blocks, 3 blocks from our house, got totally lost, and was ready to adopt a new owner. And our niece saw it on Facebook. It was Gail McClure, and that was the one in the house that she wandered to. And they was feeding her and saying, whose dog is this? Anybody know whose dog is this? We don't have Facebook, and so we didn't know. And our niece said, "Hey, ain't this the dog you lost?" And now we have to keep her tied up or keep her in sight, because she not going to find her way back home. But sheep, they get very familiar with a very short-sighted area. They can adapt to a short space, but not very far off from that. They'll be totally lost, and so they do tend to stay with what's familiar to them. They like to stay with their flock for the most part. They stay with their shepherd. They stay in their pasture. But the problem of it is, when they're taken a very short way away, they can become totally and hopelessly lost without the others, without the other sheep, without the shepherd. And of course, we understand a little bit about shepherding. A shepherd has to take them to different pastures. He can't just stay in this one little area all the time. And we do know that. We talk about that all the time. Sheep will destroy a pasture. They'll chew the grass down, and then they'll pluck it up by the roots, and they'll ruin it. And instead of most animals, once they deplete grass or whatever they're feeding off of in a certain field, they'll move if possible. Now, if they're fenced in, they can't, but if they had an open place to go, they'd move on to someplace else where they could get other, better feed. That's not the way sheep operate. They don't. They want to stay right there. And so when the shepherd has to take them to a different pasture, even though it may be just a short ways away, it becomes unfamiliar territory to them. And it's kind of a recipe for disaster. They have no sense of where they're supposed to be. They don't understand that and how to get there, and so they're very prone to get lost. Most of the time when sheep are lost, they're away from their flock. They don't do like us. If a person was out hunting or something, you got lost in the woods, most people would try to move a different direction. That's not how sheep operate. They wander around in a circle. Now, I know people in the woods sometimes lose their bearings and they can go and end up back in the same place, but no, it's intentional with sheep. They're wandering around in a circle, right, staying in the same place, and they bawl when they do that. They realize they're not with the other sheep. They realize they're not with the shepherd, and so they bah, 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 bah. When you get one sheep by itself doing that, bawling, right, what is that going to attract? Coyotes, wolves, predators, right? And so they're not getting closer to their flock. They're not getting closer to their shepherd there. They're just drawing attention there. That's why shepherds have to go looking for their sheep. Psalm 119 and verse 175. Psalm 119, verse 175 and 176 says this: "Let my soul live, and it shall praise thee, and let thy judgments help me. I have gone astray like a lost sheep. Seek thy servant, for I do not forget thy commandments." And so the psalmist writes from the perspective of a sheep. Like he's a sheep who has gone astray. He's out of that familiar way. He doesn't know how to get back, and he's praying for the great shepherd, for God to seek him out, because that's what good shepherds do for their sheep. Luke 15, verse 4, and we see this given in the gospel account, and Jesus refers to these. But in Luke chapter 15, in verse 4, Jesus is giving this example there. They understand how this works. They understand there. He says, "What man of you having 100 sheep, if he lose one of them, doth not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after that which is lost until he find it?" Now, in our thinking, why would a shepherd leave 99 sheep by themselves to go find the one that is lost? Well, as we said, the flock like what is familiar. So they will generally stay in the area you leave them. They will stay with the other sheep for the most part there. And so the lost sheep, though, will not try to find its way back to the flock. And it will panic. They move around in circles there, crying out, as we said, drawing attention to themselves until a predator gets them, or they're killed, or they die. That's their options there. And Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, verse 6, he described his own people, which were the Jews. He described them. The Jews were the most religious people on the planet, by the way, when Jesus writes this. But he says they were still like one of those sheep. They were lost and needed to be rescued. Matthew 10:6, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And so even those of us who belong to God, those of us who are saved, we still have times when we wander off, don't we? Isaiah 53:6 talks about that. He says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. And so we've all done that. We've all chosen our way over God's way at times. It doesn't end well for us. God does have to seek us out to bring us back and get us back in line there. But sheep are easily led, which makes them especially vulnerable if they're intentionally led away. If someone's intentionally trying to lead them astray. We've studied in 1 Samuel. Look back in 1 Samuel. That's what we're studying on Sunday mornings. But with Saul, King Saul, the first king of Israel there. Now, he hasn't, 1 Samuel 14:36 there to begin with. But Saul hasn't been intentionally doing anything to harm God's people. That's not what's going on in 1 Samuel here. But he hasn't been following God. He has chosen his own way. And because the congregation of people, the nation of Israel, is following him, they are being led astray. They are being led into harm's way. And it's kind of become a mantra for the people. If you remember when we studied through this, the people were just kind of blindly following Saul at this time. There in 1 Samuel 14:36, and Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and spoil them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatsoever seemeth good unto thee. Then said the priest, let us draw near hither unto God. If you remember, right before that, Saul pronounced a curse on the people and said, oh no, we're going to finish killing off the Philistines here. Nobody's going to eat any food until evening, and he thought they could finish it then. And then when evening comes, they didn't happen. They didn't kill all of them. Right? And the people, you remember, they fly on the spoil there and they kill the animals and they eat them with the blood, and it's a big mess there, and they're trying to get that straightened out. As soon as they get some food in them, that's when Saul says this, oh, well, let's keep going by night. Let's go ahead and pursue them. We've done without food and we got some of them, but now let's do without sleep and carry on. And the people are just kind of following blindly there. That's when the high priest suggests there, hey, don't you think we ought to ask God about that? Don't you think we ought to pray about that? That was kind of embarrassing for Saul too. And you remember Saul prays, and what does God say? That's exactly right. He didn't say anything. Right? He wouldn't answer there. And you see there in 1440, you remember the account there. Saul says, oh, God's not answering. God's not blessing because somebody sinned in the camp. Kind of like Achan did at Jericho and all that scene, and that's hindering everybody. That's what the problem is, and he's going to figure out, and whoever it is, doesn't matter if it's my own son, he's going to die. That's what he says in Isaiah 14:40. He says, then said he unto all Israel, be ye on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. And the people said unto Saul, do what seemeth good unto thee. Did some of those people know that Jonathan had tasted the honey when he dipped his rod in it, that he wasn't supposed to eat? It was under the curse of Saul and cursed to die for doing that. Did some of the people know that? Yes, they knew that. And still they said, do what seemeth good unto thee. Right? It's just kind of, we're going to follow you blindly. You know, it's working out so far, at least. And the people are vulnerable. You remember, God really had to wake them up there because he doesn't call attention to Saul's sin. He brings attention to Jonathan's violation of Saul's law, not Saul's violation of God's law, and says, oh, we're going to do this without mercy, we're going to do that without forgiveness. And he puts Jonathan's life on the line, hoping to wake Saul up. And what did Saul say when God narrows it down by the casting of lots and says, oh, it's Jonathan, right? What did Saul say? Oh, okay, let's kill him. Right? Jonathan said, hello, I must die. Right? And he was going to kill his own son. You remember the people stepped in, woke them up, and the people said, oh no, he's fought with God. You're not going to touch one hair of his head. Right? He's not going to die. And they finally woke up. But they're following before that like a sheep that's just vulnerable, just blindly following the shepherd there. And sometimes, sheep are led into harm by a poor shepherd, someone that's not making good judgment, and sometimes they're being led by other sheep. Sheep are notorious for following a lead sheep there. Regardless how dangerous or how foolish that path may seem that sheep is leading them in, one will take the lead and go, and they'll follow it. Multiple places around the world, that still exists. They have sheep specifically trained for that very purpose, so they can send them out, lead the flock where they want them to go. He's called, ironically, the Judas goat. The Judas goat gets in among the sheep. He leads them to the slaughterhouse. They just follow right in line, go right into the slaughterhouse. He goes out a trap door, and they take him out and use him again, and the sheep go in there and get killed. They just followed him in there blindly, like they didn't know what was going to happen. And so, it kind of brings the new meaning to Isaiah 53:7, when he says, "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth." Judas Iscariot is the one that led them to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was arrested and then led to be slaughtered at the cross. Look at Ezekiel 34 and verse 16. Ezekiel 34:16. This is describing what God does for us. Ezekiel 34:16, "I will seek that which was lost, and bring again that which was driven away, and will bind up that which was broken, and will strengthen that which was sick, but I will destroy the fat and the strong. I will feed them with judgment." And so God seeks out the sheep that are lost. He goes after those who are driven away. He gives healing to those who are injured, strength to the sickly. But those who are rebellious, they're prone to lead the rest of the flock away, may have to be removed through death. That's the judgment that he's talking about, to prevent that from continuing to happen. Of course, we know Judas Iscariot was removed through death. He took his own life there, but God removed him there. So the shepherd not only has to guard the sheep, he even carries them when necessary. And that's including when they're injured, or sometimes when they're lost or prone to be lost. I know shepherds do sometimes. If you have a sheep that keeps wandering off, sometimes they have to break their leg. And then the sheep gets very bitter against the shepherd for a while. But the shepherd has to carry it everywhere it goes. And then when it heals back, it is the most submissive of all sheep from that point on. It gets so attached and dependent on the shepherd there. And it's hard when it happens, but the shepherd has to do that sometimes. And so sheep do have a pretty keen sense of smell. I didn't realize that because they don't smell water. But they do have a good sense of smell, just not for water. That's kind of odd to me. The mothers actually identify the ewe lambs by their scent. They can tell which one belongs to them by the smell of it there. And so, the shepherd not only has to get the sheep to a water source, but he has to make sure that it is clean and pure and safe for them to drink. The water can't be stagnant. Stagnant water has a lot of bacteria, things like that will make the sheep sick. They can actually get muscle tremors, liver damage, and eventually death from stagnant water. You can't give them that kind of water there. It also can't be rapid moving water. It doesn't matter if the water is safe to drink or not. It can't be fast moving water. Sheep have an instinctive fear of it, which is good because they don't swim well. So if they get swept away in fast-moving current, what happens to them? They're not like a dog. They don't just paddle back over to the side. They usually drown. That's how that happens. And so that's why the shepherd is searching for that clean, still waters. Psalm 23, 1 and 2. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still water. The still waters there. And so that's the idea. Sheep have good memories, though, as far as identifying other sheep or the faces of familiar people. They've got pretty good memories about that. They're not discriminate eaters. What's discriminate eaters? Well, most people are discriminate eaters. I'm really bad about that, because if something doesn't look good, something doesn't smell good, I don't even taste it. Sheila says, just try it. No, I don't want to. There's some foods I'm not going to put in my mouth. I don't care how delicious other people think they are. I don't. I can't drink. If I see a date on a milk carton that is yesterday or beyond, I don't care how good the milk is, I can't bring myself to drink it. Sheila says, "Oh, smell it. It doesn't smell bad. Taste it." No, I can't do it. So, I know milk will sometimes go past the expiration date, but I can't do that. And so, if things don't look right, they don't smell right, or maybe if you take a little bite of it and taste it, you stop there. You don't keep eating. That's not how sheep operate. They don't. Sheep eat whatever they are led to. They can't tell the difference between good plants, poisonous plants, those type of things. They don't know the difference between something that's nutritious or something that's harmful. Most animals can sense that in some way. They know, don't eat these things. Yes, it's okay to eat that. But, sheep learn by trial and error. They eat it. If it makes them really sick and they don't die, they'll do that 2 or 3 times or whatever, and then they'll stop eating. They don't see the other sheep and say, "Oh, that sheep's not eating these kind of plants. That sheep's not eating these kind of plants. That sheep's not eating those kind of plants." They look at it like, "Oh, there's more of those for me." And so they try them, even though they're poisonous. And they're not discriminate eaters. They just try, and it takes them a while before they actually avoid that. Sadly, that's us sometimes as Christians. We try things even though we know they're not good for us. We know other people don't do those that are Christians, and we try them and it hurts us, and then finally we will give them up. But sheep left unattended will die. That's not a question. Not they might die or they could die. They will die if they're left unattended. That's a guarantee. I also didn't know this. Baby ewe lambs are clean and white. Baby lambs, when they come out, they are clean. White ones, anyway. They came out. They are pure white, clean white. As they mature, adult lambs even the white ones, are rarely white. They're rarely white. They're almost never clean. In fact, they're usually stained, kind of like Lane. Lane, our middle child, used to tell people he can eat a Tic Tac and have it all over him. I mean, he just gets into his work. Parker and them, Dylan and them know when he work on pools or something like that, he has the pool base all over him. I don't know what it is, but he reminds me of one of these lambs. He's rarely clean if he's been doing anything for any amount of time. But sheep actually secrete a greasy, kind of waxy substance. Anybody know what that substance is? You'll know it when I tell it to you, but anybody know what that substance is that sheep secrete, and it gets in their wool and on their skin and things like that? You ever heard the term lanolin? Lanolin is pretty common. That's that greasy substance. It's found in things like lip balm, lotions, and diaper rash cream, hemorrhoid cream, medicated shampoo, makeup, shaving cream. There's lots of things that have lanolin in it there. But lanolin actually coats the sheep's wool. Their wool is continuously growing. Now, Our animals, like dogs and things like that, they grow and shed based on the seasons. So a dog's fur in the summertime doesn't grow as fast as it does in the wintertime. And you know that if you got an outside dog, because its fur will get real thick in the wintertime and it'll shed a lot more and slow down in the summertime. Sheep's fur or wool grows all the time, but it's only sheared right before the summer months. When it's hot and they need to get rid of that, that's when they shear them there. But the lanolin actually helps protect the sheep from the elements, right? So they can be out in the weather and the cold, and it coats it there. But because they have that greasy, waxy coating of lanolin on them all the time, it collects nearly everything in their environment. Dirt, dust, seeds, grass, burrs, anything you can imagine that they come across tends to stick to that there. And then that pure white wool becomes stained and colored there, and it's soiled with all of that filth. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9, this is an interesting verse. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9, picture of Christ here. He says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Now the description there is quick to point out the hair there is like pure wool. It's not like the color of most wool, which is on the sheep. It's on the pure after it's been cleaned and gotten rid of all that filth. And sheep don't actually have the ability or the dexterity to clean themselves. They can't. We've got a cat that can clean almost every piece of her body, and the parts that she can't reach back here, she licks her hand, and does that. But they can clean just about everything. Sheep can't do that. And so until the shepherd cleans them, either in the shearing process or at other times, they stay filthy. That's the idea. And so they do have to be in well-watered pastures, but it can't be where the ground's wet, because sheep get foot rot. They can't be where there's water standing and the grass is too wet there. If sheep eat moist grass, if they eat that damp grass there, it gives them extreme diarrhea. Now, when they get extreme diarrhea, we're not going to get too graphic, but because of that greasy lanolin and stuff, it sticks close to the exit point there, and then instead of falling away to the ground, it coagulates there, starts building up, and it will actually block their ability to void their bowels. It'll stop them up like a plug, and then they die. And so you have to keep that cleared away from them there. When they get into that state, they also will attract flies much more readily, and that dung build up. The flies can actually lay eggs inside the sheep. I never heard of that before. And then the maggots hatch out, and it drives the sheep nuts, literally to the point that they will die sometimes from having those animals hatch out inside of them there. The only remedy, by the way, for that, when they get that diarrhea and it sticks to their exit point there, the only remedy for that is for the shepherd to take the sheep, turn it upside down, and shear that off, clean that off there. That's not a fun process for the sheep. It's not a fun process for the shepherd, but that's the remedy for it there. And so sheep also have rectangular pupils. I never heard that before. Rectangular pupils. Ours are round. What do you get when you have a rectangular pupil? Sheep, we can see, I don't know, 180, 200 degrees, something like that, peripheral vision, you can see about this. Sheep can see 320 degrees. That's all the way back here. when they're grazing or anything. They can see in front, to the side. Everything except what is directly behind them is what they can see with those rectangular pupils. Now, with that kind of keen awareness, you'd think, well, nothing really sneaks up on a sheep. That's true. That's true. Nothing really sneaks up on them because they'd have to be perfectly behind them and maintain that straight line, and the sheep wouldn't be able to, if they turned the least little bit, they'd know it was there. And so nothing really sneaks up on them, but they're still totally defenseless. They're defenseless. They can't kick to fend off predators. Right? Horses, mules, cows, they've got those hind feet. Right? If you've ever been kicked by a horse, you know that's an unpleasant venture. Right? Mules as well. I don't know. I've never known anybody got kicked by a cow, but I'd say it's pretty unpleasant too, isn't it, Joe? Yeah. Sheep don't kick with their back feet. Right? They don't do that there. They can raise up on their hind feet. They can do that and use their front hooves, but their front hooves aren't sharp. They don't have any real strength when they do that, to kick that way. And so they rarely even try that. There's another reason for that, though, we'll get to in just a minute. But they can't scratch, they can't bite. They have no upper teeth. I didn't know that. You don't know that? Sheep don't have upper teeth. They've got the bottom ones, and they chew against their top palate. Right? So they can't even bite predators and those there. And so sheep can run to some extent, but they're so slow that wolves and coyotes and things like that, they don't have any trouble at all catching them. So that's really not a defense mechanism either. Right? And so when the flock is attacked by a predator, most animals, if a predator gets among a flock or a herd or something like that, what do the animals tend to do? Scatter. Sheep, on the other hand, do what? Gather. They gather when they're attacked. Right? Instead of making it hard, then the predator gets the pick of the litter, don't they? Right? You all just huddle up and I'll pick which one I want to eat. That's just how they react to those kind of things there. And so they do have such a humble spirit, though. The slightest injury, right, just causes them to just give up. They just give up. They just want to lay down and die. That's what happens there. One of the reasons they don't rear up on their hind feet, as we said, to try to kick with those front paws, is because most adult sheep with a full coat of wool, if they fall on their back, they can't get up. Most animals can just waller, even cows and horses and those kind of things, they can just waller around and get right back up on their feet. Sheep cannot. They fall on their back. A shepherd has to get them back. Another sheep, maybe, I guess, could technically bump into them and get them over enough to get back, but they either get eaten, the shepherd turns them up, or they die. That's their options as they fall on their back. So you imagine they don't try that very often to get up on their hind feet. If they've been on their back for very long and the shepherd finds them, they lose circulation in their legs. And so he can't just set them back up because they can't stand. They can't walk. And he actually has to carry them with the legs down, sometimes up to an hour, to get the circulation back in their legs before they can stand and walk again. And so, sheep require constant care and attention. Look at John chapter 10 and verse 1. That's why the shepherd has to either be with them or they have to be in a sheepfold where somebody else can guard them until the shepherd can get back to them. In John chapter 10, in verse 1 through 4, we see Jesus give this example as well. He says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know His voice. And so, sheep are arguably one of the most vulnerable creatures on the planet. They are. But they're one of the most useful animals as well. In the world today, this is surprising information to me, more sheep meat is consumed than any other meat. That's shocking to me, because I don't know that I've ever eaten sheep meat. But worldwide, sheep meat is consumed more than any other meat on the planet there. Here's some interesting uses for sheep. Now, I couldn't believe this, because almost every part of a sheep is usable. Almost every part. The hide and the wool. Now, they're not made into all of these things, but they're used to produce some of these things, or all of these things. Actually, baseballs, lanolin, which is in the hide and the fur there, clothing, tennis balls, drum heads, yarns, art brushes, sports equipment, carpet fabrics, insulation, glue, asphalt binder, textiles, ointment base, footwear, paint and plaster, binder, upholstery, and felt. All of those can be used. The hide and the wool can be used to produce those things. The bones, the horns, and the hooves, they're used to make things like syringes, gelatin desserts, piano keys, marshmallows, I don't know that one, pet food, charcoal pencils, adhesive tape, combs, toothbrushes, buttons, bone jewelry, abrasives, emery boards, cloth, ice cream. Don't know that one either. The gelatin, okay. Laminated wood products, handles, bone china, wallpaper and paste, steel ball bearings, malts and shakes, fertilizer, shampoo and conditioner, photographic film, dye, cellophane wrap, and tape. All of that comes from the bones and the hooves. From the fat and the fatty acids from a sheep, explosives, solvents, chewing gum, paints, cosmetics. What's that word? Rennet for cheese. I don't even know what that is, but that's what you get from it. Right. Industrial oils and lubricants, dog food, margarine, ceramics, medicines, show polish, dish soap, tires, paraffin, chicken feed, biodegradable detergents, antifreeze, crayons, floor wax, chemicals, rubber products, insecticides, candles, herbicides, shaving cream, shampoo and conditioners, creams and lotions. From the intestines, sausage casings, instrument strings, surgical sutures, and tennis racket strings. From the manure even, nitrogen fertilizer, potash, which is what we use to treat sewage in our plants, phosphorus, and other minerals. Every part is usable in some way from a sheep. So 1 Peter 5:1, we'll just introduce this evening. But that's a lot of information about sheep. But they're important animals, but very vulnerable. And so in 1 Peter 5:1, the elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. In light of all of that information, we can understand why shepherding is so important to the sheep, and why Peter uses this analogy to relay this information. A persecuted church, which these churches are, that Peter's writing to, they're under attack by the world. They have an even greater need for good shepherds there. And so this first section is for the elders or pastors of different churches in those regions. If you look back 1 Peter 1:1, you want to see where those churches are. He says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia there. And so that's those areas there. Asia Minor is where most of those are, on those outer skirts, borders there. And so what's Peter asking them to do on behalf of God in 1 Peter 5:2? Feed the flock of God which is among you. That's a word that means to shepherd the flock of God. He's exhorting them back in verse 1. It's an invitation to bring them alongside, to encourage them in this direction. By the way, the term elder, bishop, pastor, those all are interchangeable with one another in Scripture. An elder just describes someone of maturity. A bishop is the title for the church there, and the pastor is about the shepherding functions, the leading and the feeding part. So it's describing a mature man who has an office in a local church to lead and feed the flock there, the congregation there. And so that's the analogy. That's a lot more information maybe about sheep than you needed to know, but hopefully that'll help us tie it in next week to what the shepherd or the pastor is supposed to do for those sheep. So any questions or comments so far?